signs of life. Please don't tell me that the human race did not survive. There are no people in the future. There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call.
Everybody, welcome to Raging Chickens Out to Coop Live from Monday, April 26, 2021. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards, across the country, even across the world. We stream our show live. We take calls in the Podbean app, comments on our YouTube page. And on Friday, Sean Kitchen and I break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics in our weekly news roundup. And you can get all our podcast goodies on the Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. That's you're going to find us there. And you can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Just go to patreon.com/rcpress. And if you're listening to this show live on the Podbean app, you can show us some love right now. You can drop a few bucks in our tip jar by click on that little gift icon at the bottom of your screen. Fill your digital pockets with Podbean's golden beans and send us a gift of your choice. Every gift you send helps support and expand this podcast. And you can also help the show right now by heading over to our YouTube channel. And if you're not there already, that is, right, and smash that subscribe button, like this stream, and hit that notification bell so that you know every time we go live. You subscribe, you like, you hit that notification bell. Everything you do over there helps amplify the voices that we're able to bring on this show. And if you're looking for more PA-based progressive talk after this show, hey, head on over to the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, pretty much anywhere you're streaming at 9, he's going to be there. Yes. And make sure that also you sign up for his podcast, right? Daily podcast, wherever you get your podcast. And you absolutely must check out the newly launched Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. You can find it on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcast. Their last episode featured PA State Senator Katie Muth. It was awesome. They've got a new episode cooking, but they're keeping their mystery guests shrouded in the mist. The amazing PA women stirring up the cauldron behind this podcast rock the house, and they know where the bodies are buried. Spooky, right? Yes, it is. Make sure to follow them on @TheNightCaucus on Twitter. That's @TheNightCaucus. And attention gamers, check out The Game Inn for all your gaming needs. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based, black family-owned gaming store. They've got everything you can imagine, from retro N64s to the latest consoles, video games, all platforms, large collection of collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, and kids, yep, get a discount with every A on the report card. Check them out on their Facebook page at The Game Inn. Follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn. That's with 2 N's. You got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, shoot them a message, drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. They are friends of the show, and the owners of the store are the parents and the family of one of my son's best friends, which is why I feature them here. And a special shout out to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayMan. That's with 2 N's, @SongADayMan on Twitter. So on today's show, I welcome Dr. Jamie Martin to the show. Martin is the president of APSCUF, that is the faculty union representing the 14 state-owned universities making up the PA state system of higher education. Faculty, staff, and students are facing a precarious future as the Chancellor of the state system, Daniel Greenstein, pushes forward his agenda to merge 6 universities into 2, lay off scores of faculty and staff, throw students' academic programs into flux, and force more classes online. Greenstein tells a fairy tale narrative of his redesign plans, but many faculty, students, and staff aren't buying in. Earlier today, Greenstein dropped his 439-page university merger plan, a plan that will be presented to the Board of Governors, right, to be accepted on Wednesday, April 28th. We'll talk more about how we got here and where we need to go. Jamie Martin graduated from IUP, that's Indiana University of Pennsylvania, with a bachelor's, master's degrees, and a doctorate in criminology. Her research is focused on qualitative research, corrections, and criminal justice ethics. She has published articles in the Journal of Criminal Justice Education and American Journal of Criminal Justice. She has also published a book called Looking Out, jailed fathers' perceptions about separation from their children. Additionally, she won the Center of Teaching Excellence Award in 2004 and the Outstanding Teacher Award in the College of Health and Human Services in 2008. Jamie, welcome to the program.
Kevin, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, well, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while, and I don't think either one of us suspected that, just hours before you'd come on the show tonight, that we'd have this massive drop of, 439-page document outlining the merger of the state system of higher education.
No, I mean, I'm happy that we were able to see it, a couple of days before the Board of Governors is going to consider moving it forward. But yeah, 439 pages, a lot to get through, a pretty deep dive. And a lot of the questions, concerns that we had prior to this, they're beginning to turn into alarm for me as I'm reading through this very large document.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's kind of, before we kind of jump into some of the stuff that's in that document and some of the concerns that are here, just so we kind of set the table for the discussion tonight, can we just give us a kind of little bit of background of kind of how we got here, right? And then kind of where we are. And I know that's a big ask. So, we don't have to go back to the entire history of it, but I mean, and let me say this to everybody too as well, is that, for those folks who are not in Pennsylvania, you're going to listen to the show tonight. So I'm also a faculty member at Kutztown University. I'm a member of the union, right? Just so everybody's kind of clear about that. And we've been facing kind of a series of crises year after year after year. And we had our first ever strike in 2016, which we won. And we thought that, we thought that really, I think everybody thought that there was a new day coming after that. And then suddenly it seemed like for the last couple of years, the tables have turned, if you will. We've turned some kind of weird corner. And now we've got a chancellor who comes to us by way of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on Higher Education, where he looked at how to, turn higher education into a standardized testing regime. I don't know, something like that. That would be my read on it. But now we see that these significant plans that I don't think anybody really saw coming. And now kind of here we are. So give us a little sense of kind of like how we got here and where we are right now.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll try to keep it brief because, this has been a rapidly changing dynamic and world that we're living in, at least in the state system. So you're right. After Kevin, going back, after the strike, when Chancellor Brogan departed and Chancellor Greenstein arrived, I think that we were willing to work with him, and I think we started out, thinking we can have a working relationship. At some point, he began to talk about the need to redesign the system. And maybe there are some areas where we could make some changes and upgrades and those kinds of things. And I don't know that we ever would be opposed to that. I think where the redesign really began in earnest, at least as we're moving into this consolidation or merger plan, was last summer when they were moving legislation through the House and Senate. And that eventually became Act 50 of 2020. And it was that piece of legislation that gave the Board of Governors and the Chancellor the ability to consolidate and do some other things at the university level. Our understanding at that point, we had a couple of, I think, thoughts. First, our understanding was what he was discussing at that point were more back-end economy of scale savings, by procurement, HR functions, maybe some of those kinds of functions. We never had any idea of the magnitude of these changes that are now coming out. We also thought that we might have a seat at the table, meaning, we could have some input as this is moving forward, and that didn't happen either. So after that piece of legislation was passed and then signed into law by the governor, it seemed that this thing took off in a direction we had no awareness of. We've been, sitting back wondering what exactly is this going to look like, even though he told us at the beginning, one university, one accreditation, one faculty, one program array. So he's told us what it's going to look like, but has been suggesting all along that the plan is being, it's an organic developing plan, which is really not the case.
Right.
So that was a long answer to how did we get here, but that's kind of where we are now.
No, I hear that. And, you've probably heard me say this before, and I know that if anybody's been tuning into the show, they've heard me talk about this before. I happen to have the experience of the first time that I had ever seen, it was back when Chancellor Greenstein was new. He had come to Kutztown University. He was going to give a speech. I have about an hour commute. I listen to books on, kind of like, audio books on my way back and forth. And I had just finished Anand Giridharadas's book, Winners Take All, which is essentially, after he spent several years reporting for the inside of some of these kind of, these big donors, philanthropic organizations, Silicon Valley based, hey, everybody wins in this scenario of the disruptor philanthropists. And the language that he discusses that these folks use, like all this language about transparency and inclusion and organicness and robust solutions, are really a cover for some really kind of classic austerity and destruction. And when I saw this guy speak, I went in after finishing that book, sat down and kind of listened to him speak. I'm like, oh my God, this is the guy he was talking about.
Well, and not only the transparency, be bold, be audacious, but it's also very, while it sounds as if it's organic and inclusive, it's really a much more top down. I'll decide how this will be, and I'll make it look as if we're getting lots of input. So it's been disappointing. I think we did have hopes that we were going to be able to work well together and develop ideas. That hasn't happened. So.
No, absolutely. And so, okay, so now we're at a point right now where, look, I'm generally the dark cloud in the room, right? So like after I met this guy for the first time and after I heard about this Act 50, all I saw were storm clouds at that point. I mean, I'm looking at this, I'm like, this is like the worst possible scenario because I don't trust this guy as far as I can throw him. And it seems to me that there's language that's in there that would allow him to do X, Y, and Z. I mean, that's just kind of like my job. This is what I do. I do this kind of analysis, right? But I do think that it almost seems like in hindsight that legislation really was like he wanted to keep, I think, the faculty and the staff and even legislators on board enough at that point where they were kind of seeing opportunities and possibilities that maybe we actually have a working relationship in order to get that passed. And then once he got it passed, he was able to pretty much kind of move forward with, these pretty dramatic and radical changes in the state system. Right.
And, the one other part about that is it's always presented as an either or. Either we have to do this or I'll have to dissolve the system. Right. And so a lot of what we're hearing is, well, we have to do something. I don't know that always doing something is better than doing nothing until you know for sure about cost savings. What's it going to cost? Like having a lot of in-depth discussion that doesn't seem to have happened, at least from the faculty perspective. So that part has been distressing as well, that we have to do something, but it's become obvious that this is the thing that I've decided we're going to do. I think there are lots of other things we could do or could talk about, but at this point we kind of are where we are with this plan dropping this morning.
Absolutely. And I think that, one of the things, I like, okay, look, there's a variety of ways that we can do this. And I like the way that you said this. It seems like it's always an either or. And I've been tracking some of the ways that, in both of the Board of Governors and to the budgetary hearings that happen, in the state legislature. Basically, you've got this guy who's saying like, hey, look, we could do this, or we could dissolve the state system, or we can take out these really risky loans that could potentially sink the entire business that anyone who knows anything about accounting could basically tell you not to do, right? He's like, these are our options. You can either go with my plan, right, or you can face the kind of imminent disaster and destruction, and you'll be to blame for this. I mean, that seems to be the way that the message is rolling out.
That's one of them. And then the other one, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
The other way that this has been, the real big narrative has been enrollments are declining. And that's what's led to the need to do this now, because enrollments are declining since 2010. And this has made me beyond angry, because that's a true statement. Mm-hmm. But if you go back to 2000, our enrollments are now where they were in 2000. We have fewer faculty and staff
Yes.
now than we did in 2000. But if anybody pays attention, if you ever see a graph, a chart, it all starts in 2010, and everything looks like, you talked about rain clouds.
Yep.
Everything's like, oh my God, we're going to fall off a cliff. Well, it's like, if you go back to 2000, you're going to see a chart that has this dramatic increase. And I just find that to be really disingenuous.
Yes.
And not accurate.
Well, I mentioned the issue at the time is like, this is when you first came out and you first basically laid out that case that if you look at a 20-year period instead of a 10-year period, we don't end up with a curve that looks like decline. We end up with a kind of like a mean growth curve. Right, that's been relatively steady, right, during that period of time. And the thing that kills me, because I remember back in, say, 2008, 2000, 2009, even before that, 2005, when we were told at Kutztown, when our enrollment numbers were exploding, we were told we couldn't hire more faculty members, couldn't deal with any more space because there was this demographic bubble, right? They knew that at the time. And they said that we can't hire more people because of that, so we have to employ temporary faculty members because it's going to go back down. So they knew it then, right? And they used it as a bludgeon that we were just going to have to deal with overcrowded classrooms. And then after the math, they pretend they didn't do anything. And meanwhile, we find out that all the while they're investing in fancy dorms and kind of all these budgetary schemes, and they're using all these off-balance sheet financing kind of tactics as a way to kind of build up debt. And then in the aftermath, we see when the demographics start to go down, and then we have an economy that crashes, and we have a state that continues to want to underfund us. We're left kind of holding the bag, it would seem, and now we're being told that, as a force of nature, there's nothing that we could do, which seems to me to be like the exact opposite way of thinking about this that we should.
Well, and again, so that's what's driving all of this, and you're right, all of the exorbitant spending on residence halls, on convention centers, on climbing walls. And now you have universities like Mansfield or Clarion that have huge debt loads. My home university, huge debt loads. And somehow it becomes the fault of the faculty. So that's where we have to make our cuts, right? We have too many faculty. And then you'll see, well, we can't go back and change those bad decisions. We're here, but we have too many faculty now because of our enrollments. And you're right, even at most universities, they didn't hire more faculty to deal with the increase in the students. So there have been declines in enrollments, but there's been equally large declines in staff and faculty jobs in that same time period.
Absolutely. And so let me lay out and say these two things here. So we've got we should put this on the table too as well, that Pennsylvania ranks basically 48th in kind of its state support of public higher education of all the states in the country.
Yes.
And even Greenstein, this is the one thing I'll give him credit for, at least he acknowledges that fact, right? And we've had now several chancellors in a row who will point to that fact, but their solution then is not to double down and push back on the legislature, right? To push back and say, this is what we need to do. Right? Not to say advocate with faculty and students in order to kind of increase funding to the state system, but rather looking at these variety of different schemes to go about kind of like, say, either dismantling or using austerity measures or cutting faculty or eliminating programs, whatever it might be.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the problem. I mean, would you agree that's the central problem here?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's embarrassing in my mind to be 47th or 48th in the nation in support for public higher ed. And we haven't really moved the needle in terms of going up. I think maybe we've stayed about where we are. Maybe somebody's moved below us because they've cut more funding. I don't know to what extent. But one of the folks that works for APSCUF, his name is Sean Cramsey, and he went back 20 years and looked at what the chancellors had asked for in terms of appropriations requests. And only 3 times in that 20-year period have there been a request of 2%. And 2 of those are the last 2 years,
right?
Under this chancellor. So I don't understand why. We're all aware of the financial difficulties we're facing now, coming out of still in the middle of a pandemic. But why not go in and say we need $200 million?
Right, exactly.
Now you might not get $200 million, but you might get 5% instead of 2. And it's so the lack of really strong advocacy on behalf of our students and our universities when we really are in desperate need. I mean, you're at Kutztown. I'm guessing in your department and all across the university, you're probably kind of cut down to the bone in terms of being. And we were not unhappy to see the Board of Governors decide to not raise tuition. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, when you're looking at potentially a 2% increase and no tuition increase, even the university presidents were a bit outraged at how they're going to be able to manage their universities, in the upcoming year, with no real increase in funding and costs that are being passed on to them in some of these consolidation and redesign plans.
Yeah. I would agree 100%. And I think I have at least from Kutztown University, again, this is not going to be news to anybody who's listened to this podcast. I am no fan of Kutztown University's administration, given what they have done to both the academics, the refusal to deal with health issues on campus, a whole range of things. So, but we'll put that aside for the moment. I think that at least our president goes ahead and says, okay, oh my God, I don't know how we're going to do this, but meanwhile, kind of basically takes it out on faculty, staff, and students. So, but we'll put that aside. But one of the things that let's go back to, the last Board of Governors meeting, is like, this is what prompted me like that day to reach out again to see if you want to come on the show to talk about this, because two things happened on that just infuriated me. And this goes to the chancellor. What I'll basically say it, that he seems to just be knowingly spreading lies, or at least manipulating data or ignoring other facts. Because he did two things in that meeting, because you spoke before he did, and you did two things in that. One, you pointed once again to what you've already talked about here, is that if you look at the 20-year trajectory as opposed to the 10-year trajectory, we already know that, again, it's a different picture when you look at that. But the other thing that I think was even more powerful at that meeting was when you talked about the key findings of a survey that was conducted over the faculty at the 6 universities that are facing consolidation at this point. And Chancellor Greenstein has been out there saying faculty are supportive, like students are supportive, everyone's happy. And so, but you're presenting it as his word. And so you decided to go out and let's get some data. Let's actually ask faculty members at all these things. Let's ask, and find out what they think. And, I don't know about you, but, it must have been a little bit disappointing to find out that faculty did indeed actually support consolidation. I mean, I should say 8% of faculty supported consolidation. Right?
Yes.
Right? I mean, so yes, there was faculty support, but it was 8% of the faculty that actually supported consolidation. And you go right down the list, only 11% of the faculty members believe the final program curricular array will reflect the work that they did in these subgroups. And then you found out that less than 2% of the respondents believe that students are excited. So it's like data, hard data, in the face of his proclamations. And then he went on to speak later in that Board of Governors meeting and just completely ignored everything that you had said.
I've said to a few people, sometimes giving those remarks can be a little bit uncomfortable, because I did talk about that. And we've all heard the chancellor say, he really is data driven. I like to be data driven too. I don't like to assume, if I'm talking to some faculty and they're expressing concern, that means all faculty. So let's ask them. We had almost 1,000 faculty respond in 2 days. So just the sheer number that came in and as quickly as they came in, they're passionate about this. And so having to say that and then hear immediately after that them talking about how many faculty were involved in the subgroups and how supportive they are is just like, okay, you can keep saying that, but that's not true. And then the other thing that I had mentioned in those remarks was about the mass exodus of university presidents.
Exactly.
Or the shuffling of those, and the loss of diversity. When we've lost 3 women presidents, and then among the 5, and then also among the 5, 3 from historically marginalized groups. And then there was the big discussion about diversity. I was like, I'm kind of glad we're doing this by Zoom because that could have been an uncomfortable room to be sitting in. But yeah, the faculty, it was clear. They're not excited. They don't think their students are excited. And we had an open-ended question, and some of the responses to that were pretty interesting. One of my favorites was somebody said that this reminded them of some type of particle accelerator. We're just going to put this in here and see what happens. So,
well, no, look, the metaphor that I keep on using is like, this is why I always want to harken back and remind everybody that this guy cut his teeth in Silicon Valley. Because for me, I look at that. He mentioned this when he came. He did a town hall at Kutztown University. He basically got really frustrated with the discussion at one point. He said, "Look, sometimes you just got to innovate, right? You got to innovate, right? And you go and you mess up and you do it all over again, right?" And I said that works great for SpaceX rockets. Right, where you go up, you throw this rocket up in the air, and it comes down and crashes. It's a big explosion, and then you get a bunch of data from it, and then you learn, right? But when you actually put people in that mix, right, that explosion, yes, when that rocket comes and hits the ground, is exploding. Those are jobs lost. Those are people's careers destroyed. Those are small towns like wrecked, and he seemed perfectly fine with that. You know, it's this whole kind of disruptor mentality that comes out of Silicon Valley that just doesn't work once you put people in the mix.
Right. And you know, so Kevin, you mentioned a lot there, but one of the things that we were really hoping to see in this plan, and one of the things required by Act 50, is an economic impact study. Right. So we have concerns. We have a lot of concerns for our students and what this type of approach is going to mean for them in terms of online or hybrid learning.
Right.
But we know from there was some type of webinar that was on probably about a month and a half ago, where they had some students from Lock Haven. They had business owners from Clarion, a couple of brew pubs, but they were talking about the concern of, you know, what if there are fewer students on campus? What if we don't have athletic teams? So you don't have crowds coming in after a basketball game or a football. So what if, and that this plan, and again, we're still driving, you know, pounding through it. So I don't want to go out there and say, I absolutely know this, but from what I'm seeing, from what I've read so far, that economic impact study doesn't seem to be in there, at least not in the way we thought that they would want to be able to tell us and tell the individuals in the community, here's what we think will happen.
Well, I'm looking at it like this. I mean, it seems to me they've got an economic impact study. It says the projected results reveal an integrated university that has an operating margin which exceeds the sustainability goal and a primary reserve ratio that's within one range of 20 to 40% below the goal of healthy. More importantly, the projections were able to contain investments of almost $500,000 for student success, a clear goal. Projections provided surpluses for, I mean, these are like the things that we, you know, to borrow a phrase from my friend Rick Smith, is like, these are projections that like someone reached around to the dark side of the moon and pulled it out, right? I mean, this is
right.
Well, I mean, there's no data to support any of this, and nor could there be.
No, I mean, the $500,000 that you mentioned for student success, I couldn't tell in looking through what I could see where that came from. It was supposed to be in an appendix, but then I was also wondering, is the $500,000 for student success only for the students at the 6 universities? So what about the students at the other universities that aren't, like, are they not getting any of that kind of money? They talk about in one of the appendices, you know, cost savings of $18.4 million that primarily was coming from, I think what they were explaining had something to do with reduced costs because of differences in executive leadership, changes in leadership management, those kinds of things. But that would be over 5 years. But then if you start adding up the costs of the consolidation, it comes out to about $30 million. And just in 2021-22 alone, they're expecting the startup cost to be $18.3 million. So the costs in 2021-22 are going to equal what they think the savings might be over 5 years.
Yeah, and when I see numbers like that, this is the one thing that I've learned about studying the budget documents, right, that comes out of the of this state system, right, is that usually when we see that, right, those kind of parallel numbers, it's designed that way. because they want to show that it evens itself out, because there's two different ways to be data driven, right? I mean, there's the data driven way, like when you went out and did a survey among faculties to find out what they actually thought. You waited for that data to come in, and then that data told you something. Right. The other kind of data drivenness is that you start with a premise about what you want to do, and you ask yourself, what's the data that I need to make that happen? Right.
Correct.
And this is the kind of budgeting tactic which I see again and again and again. You say, oh, look, there's these costs over here. Yes, but guess what? It's going to be made up for in this bucket over here. And those are just kind of projections and fabricated numbers, right? I mean, again, I don't believe that they're completely like fantastical. They're based upon something, right? But not the kind of hardcore economic analysis that would be necessary in order to justify this kind of disruptive move, at least in my opinion.
Right. But again, if it's 18.4 in savings and 30 in costs, that doesn't hold water in any, I don't think, in any kind of economist's mind, as the goal being to save money.
Right.
And that's where we started. I mean, that's where this started. We can't afford to not do this, because we're bleeding reserves. It can't be sustainable. I don't understand how you can have $30 million in costs and 18 in savings and say that this is that we're doing it to save the system from financial distress.
Well, and it seems like that part of the argument seems to have kind of, I don't know, retreated further and further in at least his public pronouncements, at least from what I've been able to see. Is that your sense too?
Yes. Because when people started to ask what are the projected cost savings, it kind of shifted to, well, that's not the point. So then it became, well, then what is the point?
Right.
The one point was they were also hoping that they would drive down the price for students by 25%. Now, we'd be all for that if we thought, tuition fees. But what you'll find in this report, in a footnote, said that the price reduction is going to be because of increases in retention, progression through gatekeeper courses, participation in accelerated program, and reductions in performance gaps. I don't know how that leads to 25% price reduction. Then it became expanding student opportunities. Mm-hmm. So that was what we were waiting for this plan. So how does that happen? So there have been multiple things. First, they've started out by saying students will not have to take online classes unless they want to. Then it became if the student wants to be, if they want to take it, if they want to be fully online, that's fine. But they don't. A student doesn't have to be fully online. But what they're not saying now is a student can be fully face-to-face at Mansfield University and pursue the major that they want.
Right.
And so this is now morphed into a student can start at Mansfield or Lock Haven or Bloomsburg, probably take, general education courses, but there's going to be an expectation that they want to progress to degree completion, they're going to have to take online courses. Or I guess you could transfer if the face-to-face courses, at a different campus.
Well, I mean, that's what I saw when I saw that move on their made. Like, they're not going to have to take they're not going to have to take online classes. They can take online classes, additional online classes if they want to. And I always felt like like the bottom part of that that page got cut off, right? The printer.
If they want to.
If they want to finish their degree, right? They can take, if they want to be able to kind of like have a remarkable skill once they graduate from this university, right? I mean, it seemed to me that there was an unfinishedness to that point. So let me just remind everybody here too as well, for those folks who've joined since we got started today. I'm here talking with Dr. Jamie Martin. She's the president of APSCUF. That is the union that represents the faculty of the 14 state-owned universities in the state of Pennsylvania. We're talking about this chancellor's plan to consolidate a bunch of universities and basically bring forth a redesign of the state system of higher education and leave lots of kind of disruption in its wake. Let's look a little bit at, I want to kind of talk a little bit more and drill down a little bit what's actually happening at those universities, because we had some of the folks from Lock Haven University on the program kind of a few weeks back, and they were talking about, they've been, doing their best to organize and do their best to organize, it seems to be a bunch of different levels. There seems to be, number one, there seems to be a general sense, at least to the folks that I talk to, that they are against the merger. Number two, they've worked a lot with community organizations and business members and things like this. And the town of Lock Haven is seriously, concerned about what the impact is going to be. And the sense that I came away from that conversation was, they've just tried to ask some baseline questions about what is going to happen to degree programs, what is going to happen to their kind of student base, what is going to happen to their sports teams, and they felt they were given the runaround. And so take us a little bit closer to what that process has been like at these, because you have 3 universities in the kind of what they're calling the Northeast area, and then you have 3 universities in the western part of the state that they're looking to be taking those and kind of merging those into, one university in the East and one university in the West. So that brings the total number of universities from 14 down to 10.
Right. So when this process began after the passage of Act 50, and it really did, seem like it was just a runaway train at some level at that point. The interesting thing is, I mentioned, I'll just one more time say this, the Chancellor said at the outset, this is what this is going to look like, right? One university, one accreditation, all of those things. But then set out to have a massive number of groups, working groups, subgroups, sub-subgroups, working in all different areas. So you did have a lot of people. I mean, I talked with faculty, the chapter presidents at the 6 universities that are in the consolidation plans, and at the very beginning, they were saying, "We don't know what to do. Should we be involved? Should we not be involved? We're afraid if we're not involved, we're going to be on the platter." So it was just this amazing amount of fear. Then it became so imagine if it was your university, East Stroudsburg and Millersville, just making this up, but. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to talk with individuals in the Department of English at Millersville and East Stroudsburg, and you're trying to determine what your curriculum is going to look like how does that even happen? It's so they were having a lot of difficulty with that process. Mm-hmm. You had retrenchment at Edinburgh and Lock Haven and Mansfield, so at some level it became like the Hunger Games, right? Because people are now worried: am I going to be figuring my way right out of a job if the curriculum looks this way? So there was just a lot. It just felt like a lot of chaos,
right?
And maybe intentional, right? If you have that level of chaos, it's hard to get people to really focus on what's right in front of us. And so at Lock Haven, they have been mobilized since the very beginning and asking questions like, which programs are going to remain at Lock Haven? What are our students going to be able to take at our campus? Mm-hmm. In the plan, Kevin, you'll see them talking about, it's their intent to have sports teams at all 6 universities. Well, I could have good intent, but it may not come true. So the NCAA has not ruled on that yet. And so they have their town, the mayor and the town council have concerns. Business owners have concerns. I know they're having another virtual town hall
tomorrow,
right? I think
or
Wednesday? Tomorrow or Wednesday. I think it might be Wednesday evening. So we'll tune in for that. But the basic questions, maybe once we get the whole way through 439 pages, some will be answered. But it does appear as if some of the programs that exist now on those 6 campuses as face-to-face programs will no longer be fully face-to-face. They'll be moving into a hybrid model.
I mean, I don't see how they do anything but that at this point. I tend to look at this. I think what you said before is I would put money down on part of what the process is all about. I mean, this is one of the things, again, you see in the same kind of folks that work in these disruptive industries is, they're very good at setting people to work, doing a lot of what seems like and feels like productive work that will eventually be used in order to kind of justify a predetermined outcome. And I suspect that I mean, look, I've been saying for a while now, I think this guy is, he's got a long-term agenda in terms of like his position of higher ed. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes out with books after this that's all going to be based upon this, where he's going to come out as being the guru for higher education. But that's where it's at. But I think we're going to find out there's some more of that kind of going down the road. So before I ask you, I know that there's a bunch of folks that come in and will say, listen, before we kind of run too much up on time, if there are folks that want to call in, if you got questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. You can put it in the chat into Podbean. If you're watching on YouTube right now, please, can put it in the comments. I'll take those. Or if you want to call in, you got a question, you got a comment for Jamie Martin, or just kind of want to talk about your own experiences that you've dealt with here, you can feel free. And if you're calling in on the app, you can hit that little call-in button, and it'll show up on my screen, and I could bring you in. So, go ahead. Sorry.
No, Kevin, and I think just want to make a correction. I do think Lock Haven's. I was getting a text that their town hall maybe is tomorrow evening.
It is
not
tomorrow.
Wednesday.
It is tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay.
I can barely remember the days at this point.
Yeah, me either.
Right. So let me ask you this then. So I know that one of the questions that I know that I've gotten from a couple of faculty and staff and things like this is that I think the fact that all of this is happening during the pandemic. I mean, we can't blame the chancellor for the pandemic, but it's made organizing and kind of a pushback in any kind of, say, collective fashion, at least a challenge. But I know the question is like, okay, we're at this point where it looks to me, and I think it looks to a lot of people right now, that the full intent is for this chancellor to push through this kind of major reorganization, which can be potentially catastrophic to higher ed, and it's got a lot of people kind of concerned here in the state. So the big question, and again, I don't want to throw this all on your lap, because I would argue that faculty and staff and students need to be organizing too as well. But where do we go from here? I mean, what do we do? Is there a sense of kind of we need to move forward and do X, Y, and Z at this point?
Well, as I said, at Lock Haven, they've been really mobilized. For us at state APSCUF, using air quotes, we really were reluctant to say we're opposed to this until we saw the plan. Because, I don't want to be in a position where I'm saying this is a terrible plan when we hadn't seen it. Now we have it out there. We have, some events already planned for Wednesday. We'll be having a day of action. You can find some of that information on the APSCUF website. There's another group called Save Our State Schools. They've been doing a lot of, social media. They have some events coming up. I think certainly talking to legislators, letting them know of the concerns that people have. The Board of Governors meeting is Wednesday at I believe beginning at 8:30.
8:30.
They
that's
do
what I got
have
on my calendar. Yeah.
Yeah, they have a public comment period for people to ask questions or speak up. The Senate, I think it's on Thursday. The Senate, probably Appropriations and Education Committee, will be asking the chancellor about the plan as required by Act 50. He'll be before that. Those two committees, and then also there will be an open public comment period. The vote on Wednesday will kick that off. We're hearing there may only be 2 public meetings. That would be distressing for me. I think you should have as many as you need, and not just the number required by the law. But that would also be an opportunity for people to have their voices heard and their concerns expressed before the final board vote in July.
So I'll tell everybody right now, I will put those links in the show notes for today, especially if I can't. One of the things that I think would be absolutely essential for people who are concerned about what's actually going on, to show up to the Board of Governors meeting, and it's a virtual meeting on Wednesday, and like at 8:30. Just to give you a sense, that public comment section that Jamie just mentioned, during your last Board of Governors meeting, so why don't we start with public comments? And it said, is there anyone out there? And there was one person that said, oh, I'm just listening. right? So I don't know, having a flood of phone calls and participation in that, where people are kind of expressing their concerns about what's going on here and the lack of transparency, which we see in all this, could actually be fairly useful. I think that at the very least that needs to be on the record. Let me ask you this. I just had a text come in with a question about how the chancellor has explained how 6 universities can retain individual identities while still being one. And he said no one's been able to explain it to them. Have you heard any explanation for how that happens?
No. I mean, again, it was, this is one accredited university, and he'll go through one faculty, one program, but 6 vibrant campuses. I truly don't know. I think they'll allow them to maintain potentially, the mascot, potentially allow them to, maintain those kinds of symbols, if you will.
Like, are they going to have a museum for him? Is that what they're going to do? I mean, what would they get to keep their sign in like a closed, I was reading in this thing today too as well. They say they'll still be able to maintain these identities and keep the names of the towns, but I'm like, I don't even understand what that even means in the absence of figuring out is it one school? If it is one school, how do you have multiple accreditations? My understanding is that you can't. Now they say, no, we're just going to be one accreditation. Okay.
Right.
So I'm going to have my Lock Haven gear, but for what? Like nostalgia?
Yeah, right. And, so it's not going to be Lock Haven University of Pennsylvania any longer. It will be Northeastern University at Lock Haven, or Northeastern University at Bloomsburg. So I truly don't know, how you would maintain the institutional identity, the historical memory of a particular university when it doesn't exist in the form that it has for 125 years. Mm-hmm. And we also have concerns that the chancellor has said at a number of different venues that we can no longer afford 14 residential universities in the state. So I don't know what that means moving forward for, the residents' life experience on all 6 of these campuses.
Well, and I'll tell you, one of the things that kills me is that because I think right now, by necessity, we have to focus on these very very specific kind of moves and questions. Is that what at the end of the road here? It seems to me that there's a walking away from the mission of the state system of higher education. And the whole reason why you have a university in a place like Mansfield, right? That is, absolutely gorgeous out there, but it's in the middle of the mountains, right? There's not a strong population. But the reason why they decided to locate one there was to ensure that the people that lived in that region had access to high quality public education. Right, that was going to be affordable and they could get it. Because you also know, we've talked about this over the years, where the research shows that most students they're going to go to the university that's close to home. And it seems to me that by doing this, you're basically saying we're going to get out of that. Forget the fact that Mansfield and Lock Haven don't have the top-notch kind of like internet, right? Don't have the highest speed internet because the cables haven't been run out in those areas. And now you want somebody to commute or to kind of commute virtually to their classes in an area that they might be kind of using DSL modems, right? It's just crazy to me.
We have asked those kinds of questions about equity. So if I'm a student at Mansfield, and I was a first generation college student, but if they don't have access to broadband, how does that maybe negatively impact them in terms of hybrid learning? The other concern that I've expressed, just from a faculty member perspective, what it's like in the classroom if you have a student who's struggling, or you can kind of sense there might be something going on. You might find a way to chat with them, see if you can link them up with whatever services they might need that are available at Kutztown. If you're at Kutztown and you have a student who's at Millersville in your class, and you're getting that sense there might be something going on, how would you direct them to what campus services on the Millersville campus?
There's an app for that.
I mean,
seriously,
so
this is
me,
what the chancellor had said to one of the students at Kutztown, who was raising the fact that there was already a lack of access to mental health services at the university, and he talked about reimagining access, and all I could hear about that is like, there's an app for that, and that's it.
Reimagining access to mental health care.
Yes, maybe there's a way that you could call in, or that you could, I mean, literally talking about like some sort of outsourcing situation where a student could call in to some service and get access to kind of like, triage their mental health concerns. I was floored by that. But of course, that's a particular model of thinking, right?
Right. Yes.
But
not mine, but
no,
yes,
no, totally. I get that. But so, I mean, the other thing too, again, I'll say this again to everybody else. If you do want to kind of have any additional comments, you have any concerns, you want to call in, please feel free. We only got a few minutes kind of left in tonight's show. Be happy to take your calls or concerns. Like I said, I hate to put this all on your shoulders, right? But I'm thinking like, is there hope, right? I mean, I think that's kind of, is there hope that there's another way possible, or is this guy just going to kind of force this through? Because it seems to me is that I watched the chancellor when he was kind of at the budget hearings, and I watched him use Cheney University, right, as a way of justifying, like, basically merging Mansfield, and basically saying like, look, it's not fair that we have to do all this restructuring at Cheney, right, which is a historically black college university, and then we're not going to do that to Mansfield. I was astonished, and it seems to me that he's determined to kind of move forward on this. And I at the last Board of Governors meetings too as well, after he completely ignored everything that you said, ignored the evidence that was kind of presented there, he went on and told these kind of nice little stories and narratives. And then I watched kind of Cynthia Shapira, like the chair of the Board of Governors, say that was inspirational. I've seen some faculty, I've seen some legislators come out and basically being horrified of what's going on, but it seems that this train has kind of left the station in some ways. And so, I mean, if we're to look toward any kind of effort or organized effort to push back, I mean, where do we go from here?
Well, again, there are those options, but one thing that we've been saying, from the start, is we will wait and see what this plan looks like. But I know a lot of us are sticklers for many things. My background's in criminology and criminal justice. I'm kind of a stickler for people abiding by the law. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not talking, I'm not going to go into the criminal justice aspect, but Act 50 lays out 10 things that have to be in this plan. And if they're not in there to the extent that is expected by that act, then there should be some braking mechanism in place that says, wait a minute, slow down. If you have to go back and get these pieces in here, do that. But if there are things that are not in the plan that the law requires to be in there, I see that as a problem. And if the board moves it forward, and there isn't some way to actually make sure there's account for those 10 things actually being outlined, I see that as a problem. And there should be a braking mechanism, at least because of it not following the law.
Well, is there the braking mechanism? Like this, my question goes to this: if he does not follow the law, if he does not follow what those things are there people in a position of authority that are willing to put a stop to it on the basis that he didn't do this, or are they going to let it slide?
Yeah, that's a question I cannot answer.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is all the more reason, again, what kind of Jamie had said earlier, we've got these, you got the Board of Governors meeting that is coming up on Wednesday beginning at, is it Wednesday, right?
Right.
Right, Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. It's a great place to come in and have public comment. There's going to be a series of events. I would encourage, as Jamie mentioned already, it's all save our system. Is that what I should have had that up right now?
Save our state system or state schools.
Let me pull it up right now. So I've got it. So
SOSS.
Yeah, SOSS. Let's see. Sorry, everybody. Let me give this. I want to make sure that people have that. Save Our State Schools. You can check them out at it's Save Our State School. Oh, I just lost it again. Here we go. It's at Our State Schools on Twitter. They've been doing some great organizing there. If you look at saveourstateschools.org is the website address. Again, I'll put this information in the show notes. I would encourage anybody who's listening, who's kind of invested in making sure that we hold on to state system of higher education, to head on over to the Board of Governors meeting virtually. I will also put the link directly to that. There it will be streaming live on YouTube, and there's information there about how you can call in for public comments too as well. So, you know, I hate to leave conversations like in a despairing moment. So, I mean, if you kind of had any message to kind of say the students that are out there that are kind of thinking about their, worried about their degrees, worried about or faculty that are members worried about their jobs, staff members are worrying about these towns, what would you leave those people with?
Well, I think most importantly is make sure your voices are heard. You know, speak out, ask the questions that we have. You know, they have an obligation, I think, to answer those kinds of questions from individuals that have legitimate ones and not dismiss them as like this is going to be great for everybody. We've heard from a lot of students; they have lots of questions, and you know, we're concerned what's going to happen for those. I almost called them kids, for those young people that are coming in the class of 2021. You know, I want our students to know what to expect when they come to one of our universities, to know they're going to get a great education. But I think they have legitimate concerns about what does this mean for my experience at Mansfield or at Edinburgh. So I'd encourage people to ask questions, talk to their legislators if they have concerns or have, you know, things that they'd like for them to ask of the chancellor. And I think to the extent you can, just insist on getting an answer, but tuning into the Board of Governors and to the Senate hearings and getting to some of these events, I think will at least as we start getting information and understanding this plan more, we'll be putting out whatever we can to help students or colleagues and staff members to understand what's in there.
Excellent. Well, Jamie, I appreciate you taking time out. I know today has been kind of one hell of a day, to put it lightly, for you. I know you've been going all day with these meetings, especially after this report dropped and kind of preparation, which is going forward. Obviously, wish you kind of all the best going forward, and we're going to be pushing from our end over here and doing what we can to actually help shine a light on this. And for my 2 cents of this, when I look at the fact that we're almost at the end of the semester, and this is like, again, I would view this as a classic move, right? It gets dropped at the end of the semester when students go home, when faculty are kind of at the end of it. But, I think that's one of the big question is, anyone who's invested in the state system for higher education now is that how are we going to organize over the summer, and what are we prepared to do come the fall, depending what the outcomes of this process is. Because right. I do think that this guy, we have to hold him accountable, and we cannot allow him to kind of like just steamroll this stuff through.
No, and he should want to be, asked and be able to answer these tough questions.
Absolutely.
That's what leaders do.
Absolutely. And I think this is a good thing. Yes, Lee just kind of chimed in on YouTube, said, say no to consolidation. We'll give you the last word on that, Lee. Well, Jamie, once again, thank you so much for kind of joining us here on Out the Coop Live tonight. We look forward to kind of touching base with you again, kind of see where we're going to look, I know it's going to be a busy week. All the luck to you, and we'll see you at the Board of Governors meeting on Wednesday.
Okay, great, Kevin. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks so much. Hey, everybody, thank you for tuning in tonight. I want to remind you can help support this show by going to patreon.com/rcpress. Become a patron for those $5 a month. We'll see you on Friday for our weekly news roundup. And next week, we've got the directors from the Rights of Nature film. We'll see you then. See ya.